Miss Four, and today on The Beauty of Business, we're going to be talking about makeup manufacturing, testing, and regulation, the idea of non-toxic versus clean makeup, and animal cruelty. All very, very sexy topics if you happen to like that thing. If not, this may be a video you skip or you play on those long nights where you're trying to go to sleep. Just lull you into that sleepy. But anyway, we're here, we've got our makeup on, we've got our coffee. So we're ready to talk about a very complicated subject. And they're all interrelated, that's why they're all in the same video together. Now, I, for the last 2 years and change, have been working in medical clinical research on the human side. And I work on the patient-facing or the participant-facing side for the medical research. So I have some sort of an idea of how research works. Also, back in the day, I had a roommate who was one of the research testers for makeup. This is one of in a consumer study, when they say that. She was one of the people that she'd get a package in the mail. It would have either makeup, cosmetics, hair care, skin care, and it wouldn't be plain packaging. She would have a series of questions to answer. They would list how long and how in which way that they wanted her to use it, and then she would, after that point in time, fill out the information and send it back to them. So she was one of the people on the consumer side of things for cosmetics, so I have an idea about that as well. Now, as far as makeup testing goes, the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, is who's in charge of a general regulation, but in many ways they're very hands-off. There's a lot of different reasons for this, but their main concerns are the health, safety, and well-being of the public, but not wanting to get too oppressive in its regulation of things. So with the FDA and cosmetics, and this would be skincare, makeup, hair care, etc. They have a little game that they play, and it's called, is this a cosmetic? Is this a drug? Is this a device? Or is this soap? And soap has its very own category. It's very exciting. I never knew. So in the US, makeup companies are not required to file their company, to register their company, or to file their formulations. It is all voluntary. They do have where your company can voluntarily register all these things, but it's not required. Also, recalls are voluntary. If the FDA is telling you need to do a recall, though, there's a pretty good chance that you should, if for no other reason than to escape some legal liability if people decide to sue you. Because if it's serious enough that the FDA is involved, then it's fairly serious. Now, the FDA is worried about two categories generally: adulterated items or misbranded items. Now, adulterated items, I think about, it runs the gambit between your shipping case got rat poop all over it, and so it's been adulterated. Also, the factory that it was created in had some issues, problems. A large vat of glass or whatever found its way into the machine works, and your product is adulterated. The humorous side of things, I think about the Batman movie where Joker took all the cosmetics and put poison in them, and so all the newscasters had to show up on camera with no makeup and their hair all wild. So if the Joker's been around, your makeup could be adulterated. The other element is misbranding. That's if your packaging, either what your packaging says or what it doesn't say. There are certain things that your packaging needs to say, unless it's a small sample size of things, and then there's exclusions to that. But really, the product needs to be explanatory in the way of how is this supposed to be used, what is it used for, and then if there are certain elements to it that are like a heads up, like with some of the items, like don't put near your eye. Now, because a lot of things are not heavily regulated but need to be labeled, This is where we get the idea where they say with some eyeshadow or eye pigment palettes, not safe for the eye area. Color pigments are more regulated because of ideas of things like staining, and it's a use that is not necessarily expected when you're going to be using an eyeshadow. You don't really expect for it to stain you. So in that case, not safe for eye area could be a pigment warning. And people who are used to indie brands are used to this because there's some powerful colors out there that will stain your skin. So they always recommend doing a patch test, but it's not inherently dangerous. So you can just label it as such. Items like glitter may be not safe for eye area for other reasons, because if you drop glitter in your eye, it's not great. That's problematic. But usually pigment warnings are because the FDA does care about colored pigments. Hair dyes and things like that are regulated a little differently, but most of the time, and coal tar dye, don't know why, but anyway, if you have it labeled, if it's labeled, this is the correct use, if you're using this product in this way, you're all good. So the FDA is not going to get really involved unless you have some crazy claims and you've misbranded it, or you've made your packaging in such a way as to be misleading in a problematic or dangerous way. If you are making it look like it should be used for one thing, but really it needs to be used for another, that's a problem. So that question, is it a cosmetic, is it a drug, is it a device, or is it soap? That kind of delineates them in the mind of the FDA about how to proceed with things. If things are a drug, meaning if in some ways they are made to drastically change whatever it is they're involved with. The same with a device. Is a device needing to be regulated? If it says I'm going to be, peeling off layers of your skin and treating acne, that's a device that needs to be regulated. It's not just cosmetically, just giving you a light buffing off of your skin cells and giving it some sunshine. That's more cosmetic. If it's going to be physically changing the character of something, that's going to be a device that needs to be FDA regulated. And as far as the drug goes, that's also something that's made for a treatment to either try and help a disease, to drastically change the structure and function of something. So that's going to be regulated in a different way. Now, the idea of prohibited ingredients, there is a list with the FDA of ingredients that you can't use, that are not safe for products. But for the most part, the FDA puts almost all of the burden for testing on brands to make sure that it works like it says it does, and that it's labeled in a way to be clear as to how and where and what way it's supposed to be used in. And the brands generally have a vested interest in that because they don't want to be sued. They want people to like their brand, and they don't want any strange news, about their products being problematic, either misbranded or adulterated. Now, misbranded, a lot of claims are made for different cosmetics purposes that are kind of wild and crazy, but they're not technically misbranded in a way as to fool the user or to be hazardous if somebody were to use the product in a way that it's not obviously intended to be used. Now, testing for things. The FDA is going to spot test places where makeup and cosmetics are produced. They're factories. They're going to do just pop in and testing of things like that. They're not generally, if things are imported, they may randomly test some things, take a look at things, but they're not on the whole going to be uber regulating things that come in. They just assume that everything that comes in via import is going to be held to the same standards in country that everything that's made in the US is. The problem is if there's factories outside of the US that are not inspected by the FDA, that may be some issues there. There may be some adulterating happening in those foreign factories that they are not aware of. The FDA will, besides these spot inspections and import inspections, they will be following up on complaints by consumers about adverse effects in products. So if we all complain about a shampoo making our hair fall out, the FDA is going to get involved with that. Now, let me tell you something about testing, about clinical and consumer testing. Clinical testing is extremely thorough, scientific, expensive. In my job, it depends on who is sponsoring the research to do, and it's got to be important as far as they need to have this kind of very scientific explanation of things. In medicine or devices, you understand why. Humans are going to be helped or hurt depending on the safety and efficacy of whatever it is that they're looking at. So clinical research goes through multi-phase steps. It's trying to decide who is the group that needs to be tested, what kind of people are they. In the case of cosmetics, what age range, what skin types, what weather, what type of external factors are involved, how many people makes a good sample size for something to have accurate results, how long does the study last, are there pictures involved, and with clinical research, all of that is highly regulated and run through more scientific framework, and it's very expensive. Sponsors for that have to have money. And they have to, in the case of cosmetics, they have had to decide that having clinical results are worthwhile to what they're trying to explain to their customers of why the customers should buy their brand, because clinical research means something and it's expensive. In the case of sponsors, let's just talk about something that I'm intimately familiar with, colon cancer research. Now, if it's colon cancer research trying to figure out what are the DNA markers in the blood, but it doesn't have any profit motive, it's strictly for the betterment of mankind. Usually the sponsors are either the US government or their research institutes or their universities, people that are interested in just the betterment of humankind and knowing things. On the other hand, there are companies that are investigating colon cancer because they're looking at making either drugs or devices or tests that are going to find colon cancer earlier, and it's a marketable thing that's going to make them money. So in that case, usually the sponsors for that, the people paying the cost for it, is the brand that's going to be marketing whatever this, either testing, this device, or this drug, because they have a vested financial interest in that. Now, this is going to be related to cosmetics. Like I said, the difference between having, in a clinical research study, X number of people found this, and whenever you see people talking about clinical research, they're going to have this information, all of the salient details, posted somewhere where you can see it. They'll say in a clinical research study, and they'll have a little asterisk, asterisk that will take you to the salient information. They will also have things that they'll put up, this product has been proven, and what they're doing is they're not referring to something specific. They're talking about, well, lots of people have done studies on turmeric and found it to be a great thing. So when they say proven, they're more just referencing this general idea of, well, somebody did some research and proved some stuff, but they can't at all back that up, or they could, but they would have to show their sources. So they're not going to. There's going to be no asterisks, and down below more information about the clinical study. I'm going to throw in pictures here. A couple of my favorite brands do clinical research, and some of them do consumer research. So for the clinical tests, they're going to list all that information. How many people was it? And the idea that it should be a broad enough sample size for it to be legitimately meaning something. And you don't necessarily know that because you don't know how old were the people, what was the sample size, were they all from one area of the country. You don't know that, but you trust in some ways that if they're going to go through the idea of paying for clinical research, for before and after photos, for skin, density tests and water retention little thermometer thingies, where they're being sciencey. They want those results because they want to show you that it's not just the idea that I felt like my skin was hydrated, but my skin was actually clinically tested by a machine that goes bing and it was more hydrated. That's where you get these weird numbers, like some of the Charlotte Tilbury, where it's like 265% bigger. Like, this is more of and usually it'll have that asterisk and it'll tell you where they got that information from, what the test was like. But usually that's a weird number that you got in a clinical study, but you don't necessarily know from just the high points, what was the machine that was used, how long was this, like what was you don't know the parameters. So some of the research can be misleading, and if it says, your skin is more hydrated by 256%, that's immediately going to bring on, you're like, huh? And so you're going to take that with a grain of salt, which brands probably know, but legally that keeps them, a little more safe. But so for clinical research, you're going to see numbers and percentages and some kind of backup. This is where we got this information. Now, consumer reviews. This is where 9 out of 10 people felt like, hey, I feel more hydrated. I felt more hydrated. And that's where it's like 92% of customers felt hydrated. Well, a lot of people can feel hydrated, or they can be all excited about something, but usually the consumer studies are blind. You don't know what you were getting, so you don't have a name convincing you felt more hydrated. If you're having ethical consumer review, that's something that's blind. You just are looking at the product and saying, I felt more hydrated. And then you have some research that is not at all blind. You're getting this kind of a product. You're looking at the packaging, you're feeling the feels from the packaging or from the brand name or whatever, and then you're responding, oh, I felt hydrated. And you may not really actually feel hydrated. You just might feel like, you've been under the influence of the Tilbury, like, ooh, shiny. And then now a lot of products are giving samples for review to people who then are supposed to go onto a website and respond about it or post about it, about how their 10-day sample of X went. And so that's kind of the newest wrinkle in the review factor, is people being given product for their review. Now, this brings about, because we've talked about the idea of adulterated. The FDA does not have any distinction between organic or synthetic. They don't have any questions about that. The only thing when they talk about soap is they do have a distinction between what is actually considered soap and what is some other kind of detergent-y sort of thing. They do also with soap take that consideration. Is it just made to make you, clean and smell nice, or is it made to like treat acne, or like more of a drug consideration with the soap? Is it a treatment effect? The humorous thing is that by their definition, a lot of things that are labeled soap, which is okay, they say you can label it as soap, but that it's not technically soap. It's not like fat and lye and whatever. It's like a synthetic gel of cleansing stuff. But you can still label it soap, but like most things are not actually soap according to their definition. But as far as adulterated, the FDA does take some elements that it needs to be non-toxic in certain ways. But lately we've had the clean revolution, and that doesn't necessarily have any regulatory meaning. Everything's supposed to be non-toxic. And you can have natural ingredients that are poisonous. Again, as I mentioned in my skincare video, the dose makes the poison. So, a little bit of belladonna, maybe not problematic, but a lot of it, kill ya. There you are. So there are a lot of plants and things that are technically organic that can kill you. Also things that are clean, that are technically sourced in a way that conforms with an idea. And again, a lot of things will put on a clean label. It's clean makeup, but what does that mean? Does that mean that our factories were inspected? Does that mean that our products were sourced from a place? And you really have to care and find out about it and see, if a brand is being, forthcoming about all of these things. Like, how does it determine that it's clean makeup? Also, things that are clean at Sephora, how is that determined? And it's like, is a product natural? How much of a product, what percentage is synthetic? Is the fragrance synthetic? Is it 98% natural? And not necessarily all things that are natural are great either, because if it doesn't have anything that keeps it from decomposing quickly or getting, stuff in it, growing that it's not supposed to have, then you could have a natural product that's really, really gross. So the idea behind throwing a clean label on something, you really have to be curious to know, what do you mean by that? And most of the time, like I said, the FDA requires that it be non-toxic, and everything should be non-toxic. But what is clean? Is it just virtue signaling? Does it mean that a certain percentage of things of organic nature? Like, what does it mean? So most of the time, the idea of clean beauty is an ethos that they're selling, as opposed to what's actually above and beyond other products that are manufactured maybe in the same space, in the same way, with the same products. So that's something that you have to care about and be curious about, and it has to go beyond like, well, they put a label on it that says clean. Why would they lie? Well, according to the FDA, as long as it's not misbranding in a way that's going to hurt you, they don't care. So now we're going to talk about the animal testing and the China issue. Anymore, most of the products don't need to be animal tested at all, and everybody knows that. Most of the elements to it and cosmetics, they can be more easily tested on humans. If you're doing animal testing, you also have to have that very scientific, concerned way to do things. You have to have a place for the animals to live. If it's going to be legitimate testing, they have to have a certain level of health in order to see if your cosmetic is going to hurt them anyway. They have to be fairly healthy. And it's expensive, time consuming, and most people cannot justify testing on animals for cosmetic reasons. For drugs that might cure things, they can justify that. But, scientists are not cold-hearted people for the most part. They're people that care, and that's why they do science. Not always, but I find that is a regular thing, that they're very thoughtful people. So coming to China now, for cruelty-free, for the idea of animal testing, China was the big, problem. I'm trying to find a nice way to say that, but the big problem with cruelty-free. Now, it used to be that animal testing in cosmetics was a thing, and then it was a thing in China, but sorry, again, morning. Not necessarily a big thing in the US as much, because consumers were really pushing for things to be cruelty-free and no animal testing, and there was a lot of pressure for that, and there was an upside that people would buy things that were cruelty-free and that were shown to be cruelty-free at every level of both testing of ingredients and end product testing. Now, China was all about animal testing for a while, and then for a while they made it where things that were produced in their own country didn't have to go through the earlier animal testing. So it gave them a competitive advantage in that way. Also, it made things cheaper, and they didn't have to regulate as much and spend as much money from that perspective. And then it was, well, things that were being imported needed to be tested. So any of the brands that imported into China to be sold in China had to be tested, either in the beginning or the end product stages. And then China moved to the, well, we don't have to test it, pre-production sort of thing on animals, but we're going to test it post product. And then about 2021, May of 2021 was where China was really changing certain things, that they wouldn't necessarily have a requirement that things be tested on animals at any point. It wouldn't be required by law. Now, it wouldn't be where you can't. It wouldn't be illegal for them to test. Like if they wanted to pull something and test it on an animal, they could, but it wasn't regulated that way. And so for a lot of people, it's like, okay, does it change my brand's cruelty status now if they're wanting to go to China, and China could at any moment go, gotcha, and grab their product, their post product, and test it on animals? Now, everything, it's whether or not you trust the Chinese government. But what I want to break it down is that some of this, if you use economic logic, China is up against some of the same things that we are here with the FDA. Testing takes manpower, testing takes time, and testing takes money. And you have to have all these things set up. You can't just like grab a bunny out of a bush and throw some makeup on it and, we've tested. It's rigorous if you're doing it. And the thing is, if China really wants to mess with a US company, say a US company, a makeup company, was really throwing shade at the Chinese government for this, yeah, they might decide to pull a bunny out and do it that way. But for the most part, that takes money and time. It's a lot easier for the Chinese government to just say, we're having these problems in our shipping lanes. Your tanker carrying your cosmetics just needs to wait a couple weeks till we get things straightened out, or a couple months, or we just don't think your tanker is going to fit into our space here, so you just really need to go home. It's really easy for them to spend very little time and money to mess with companies that they're wanting to mess with. And so the idea that China is moving more and more towards US standards, some of it is purely economic. It is not cost effective to test. It is not time and management effective. And it's more effective to put all of the burden on companies to do their own testing, to figure out what kind of testing and safety and efficacy testing that they do. So it's just regular regulation, and the idea that they can save themselves time and money by doing this. Now, at some point in time, there's going to be less worry about the gotcha animal testing in China. And again, theoretically, they keep records of all of this. This is all a matter of public record, but you have to care and you have to dig deep, and you have to trust that people are doing their due diligence in public record keeping. And all of that is it's a faith issue. But we have a lot of concerned citizens that are going to be looking into that. And I'm going to post a couple of websites that you can consult for updates. But everything really is moving towards more of a US style of more laissez-faire regulatory systems. And most of that has to do with time and money and how expensive it is to test, even on a small level. And so China is starting to get out of the way of this. And so soon, it's probably not going to be an issue, or it's going to be the same issue that we have here in the US, which technically animal testing is not illegal. It's just, it's not generally going to happen because of the cost, the outlays of time and effort, and the fact that there's not a product, problem with consumer safety. And the FDA is not going to get involved, and oftentimes, even when things are adulterated, it's an issue that companies need to resolve in a way, because some of it has to do with sourcing rather than the actual products. Take talc, for instance. For a long time, people used talc and baby powders, and then there was an issue. And what they came around to was that a lot of talc was contaminated. And so you'll see talc in all sorts of products now, but the reason that people may try and stay away from talc is not because it's adulterated and it's toxic, but because it dries things out. It's like a desiccant on your skin, and it looks different in a way that you don't want it to. But if you have oily skin, maybe talc is the way. But it doesn't have the same issues. But why something is not working or problematic may not be something that the government can solve. It needs to be companies. It needs to be where people are sourcing things from. So it's a very, very touchy sort of situation. Now, here's the big question: is the idea, if we've been successful in applying pressure to both our manufacturers, our cosmetics companies, and also regulatory institutions in China, and we're moving away from cruelty-free being a thing, because if everybody doesn't test on bunnies, then everybody is cruelty-free. We're all happy about that. That's actually what you've been working for. But the idea is forgiveness. And when something is first a new thing, it's hard and difficult, and there's all sorts of mountains to climb to be a certain way, to be better. And that idea of when we know better, we do better, it takes some gumption to actually do that, to be a brand that says, we're not testing on animals, and they're out there. It's not something that people see all the time. It's a thing. It's hard to be innovative. I can't talk again, more coffee. But in the beginning, it's something. It really is something. But now we have new brands coming in, and being cruelty-free may be not that hard. Like maybe if you want a Leaping Bunny certification, you have to go through all of the hoops to demonstrate that you're actually that. But you could be cruelty-free and you just don't want to spend the money on going through that, or the time. It's not meaningful enough to your sales, or you just don't have the money or the outlay to take time to do that, whatever you need to do, whatever it takes. But there's going to be a lot of brands that are cruelty-free that have never had to go through the problem of deciding whether or not to be sold in China. They've never had to decide that as a limiting barrier. And the question is, these older, larger brands, the mindset has totally changed. If you think back, I even think about in my lifetime, how different the mindset was in the 80s about things. And if I look back and I judge things from my current point of view in the 80s, I'm like, wow, that's messed up. But the person living in the 80s didn't have that view. It wasn't like that. So you think about all the people who have these viewpoints from the 60s, from the whatever, that are just, from this point of view, untenable. But back then they were the regular, they were normal. So you start thinking about these older brands that being animal tested in China was a thing, and you had to do that if you wanted to be tested, and cruelty-free was not a thing. People didn't know. And there wasn't such light shown upon what that looks like for the animals, etc. We just didn't know. So this idea of forgiveness, at what point in time when we get to be worldwide, mostly cruelty-free, do you forgive a brand? Do you say, okay, you were born in the 1960s, you had no idea that what you were doing was horrible, you had no idea what it meant, and you were just trying to sell a lipstick, and there's no way now you can get cruelty-free status because at some point in time you have tested on animals. At what point in time does an older brand be forgiven for that? And then if you're going to forgive them for not being cruelty-free in this day and age, from having at one point in time, been tested, is this like, being mad at somebody because they're not a virgin anymore, and it's like, it's way past that. There's no way to regain that, but you're going to be mad about it. I don't know. That's a question that everybody has to figure out. When When do you look at a brand's current practices and say, you know, I'm going to be able to forgive you for not being a trendsetter, a groundbreaking, somebody who went against this idea of cruelty-free. All of the people that made those decisions may no longer be on their boards. They may all be dead. And so how long? And then once brands are cruelty-free, what is the next thing that we need to ask of our cosmetics and makeup companies? What sort of requirements for being better in the world do we need to look at if we have taken away this idea that they don't test on animals, they're more planet friendly? Like, what are we looking at next? And I just want to end this very long, very complicated subject with a TV show I really enjoyed. And I didn't think I was going to, because it's a little silly too, but I like that as well, called The Good Place. And going to be a little bit of spoiler alert, but it's on streaming now if you want to watch the whole thing. This isn't going to ruin it for you. But they come to the place where they're trying to figure out why in the last 500 years hardly anybody has gotten into the good place. And what they figure out is in the math that, you know, people think that they're doing a good thing, but things are so complicated that they're actually losing points. Like they go to buy a nice juicy tomato from their local, you know, from the market, and don't realize that it's actually, you know, filled with pesticides and these horrible things. You know, you think you're sending a nice thing of flowers, you know, and it's ruining the ecology. Or you buy a sweater and it's been made by, you know, slave labor. So that things are so complicated now that nobody could get into the good place. And I think about that often when I'm thinking about all the things that we want to do to be good people, to be good stewards to the planet and to other things that are here. And like, we need to be doing good things. We need to be moving that needle forward, but it's really complicated. And we also have to think about this notion of forgiveness is like, you know, the same, and this is not exact logic, but, you know, do you believe that criminals can be rehabilitated, or is it just punishment? Cosmetic companies, if they once tested on animals, can you believe that they are rehabilitated and wouldn't do things that are horrible like that now? Can you forgive them? Can you allow them out in society? Can you put, you know, the L'Oreal product on, or the, you know, the Chanel or the whatever, knowing that at one point in time they did test on animals, but that everybody who made that decision might be dead. So anyway, it's super complicated. But if you haven't seen The Good Place, I recommend it. Like I said, it is silly, but it has all sorts of talk about philosophy and some literature and some, you know, deep logic. So I just feel like this is a pretty complicated situation, but I think the good thing about bringing it back to the beauty of business is economic things sometimes help out. The fact that animal testing is expensive and unnecessary really is a great push. Also, people caring about cruelty-free and being willing to put their money where their mouths are and to investigate stuff. That's a beautiful thing in beauty, is that we've made these strides because people cared to help out the planet, to make our animal friends feel safe, and all these great things. And I think that is the beautiful thing about the beauty industry, is that it can change, and it does change, and oftentimes for the better. So anyway, we'll wrap it up. Enjoy your coffee, stay hydrated, have a beautiful day, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.